This is Hoop City with Paul Sir on Sports 1440.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! We did it!
Here's your host, Paul Sir.
Welcome, everybody, to Hoop City on this very nice Saturday morning. It's a bit overcast in Edmonton right now, but it beats the heck out of snow on the ground, Josh. So I'm excited about a great show today with so much to talk about. And Josh, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm just living the dream, Paul. Better now that you're here.
Oh, my gosh, you sweet-talking fool, you.
That's me.
We have a great show today. As I mentioned, we have Pat Boylan, the voice of the Indiana Fever. He also is the voice of the Indiana Pacers. But isn't it great to be able to have Pat on talking about the return of Caitlin Clark, the reassembled Indiana Fever lineup, the Toronto Tempo having Canada's first regular season game last night. Unfortunate loss, but they played really well against Washington. So we have WNBA basketball in Canada officially now, and the season kicks off today with a very compelling matchup between the Caitlin Clark-led Indiana Fever and the Paige Beckers-led Dallas Wings. So we're going to have a great conversation with Pat. Really looking forward to that. Have our good friend Ben Golliver back on doing the deep dive today. And, man, do we have a lot to talk about with the playoffs. Now, we pre-recorded yesterday afternoon, so we didn't have the results, obviously, of the Knicks and Spurs wins last night. But the talk itself about the other series and just about the NBA in general, I think you're really going to enjoy. And also this weekend, in fact, at 1:30 this afternoon over at the Expo Center in Hall D, the CEBL season is going to start with the Edmonton Stingers squaring off against the Winnipeg Sea Bears. And that, again, is at 1:30. And Doug McLean, the voice of the Stingers, will be with us to talk about them. Doug won't be on the play-by-play call today. Our good friend Mark Majot will be, however, because this is a CBC nationally broadcast game, the inaugural broadcast on CBC of the CEBL. And Doug's going to come on the show. We're going to talk about the Stingers, about the new lineup, about the league. So that'll be at the top of the hour. You can text us at 833-401-1440 if you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, observations about the playoffs. We welcome any and all of your messages. So that's our number again, 833-401-1440. So without further ado, Josh, we have a ton to talk about. Let's go to your 3-pointers.
Yeah, all right. So 3 from deep. Number 1. Victor Wembanyama last night made history as he is the 4th player in NBA playoff history to record 35-plus points, 15-plus rebounds, and 5-plus blocks in a game. If you throw in his 3 3-pointers that he made, that makes him the only player in NBA history to have a stat line as such. I think Wemby has figured out the Wolves' defense.
You think? Yeah, I think you're right. He has figured it out. It did rattle him certainly in Game 1, less so in Game 2, although he still, to your point, Josh, he really wasn't himself in Game 2. But last night he was himself, and in fact, let me put it this way. He was too much of himself for the Timberwolves because he has figured them out. The fact that he can step out and hit the 3 in the way that he does when Rudy Gobert is guarding him, that's problematic because Rudy, outside of the key, has limitations defensively. And when you have Wemby out front, you really have a guy who plays like he's 6'5", only he's 7'5". So yeah, he's figured it out. It was a magnificent game by Rudy Gobert, a very strong performance by the young San Antonio Spurs. The Wolves were certainly better than their abysmal Game 2 performance in San Antonio. And it was a fun game to watch, to be honest. It went right down to the wire. The score spread really wasn't indicative of the kind of game that it was. Now, having said that, the Wolves were always battling back throughout the evening. Anthony Edwards was very good. Julius Randle, I think the Spurs have done a fantastic job of identifying what Randall's tendencies are, which is throw the ball away when he tries to become too much of a playmaker. But Wolves had a better performance. The pressure will be on when they play again tomorrow night to try to find a way to win and go back to San Antonio tied 2-2. But Wemby and the Spurs appear to be in a really good place.
Yeah, that was the Spurs' first win in Minnesota in 4 years.
Wow. And Minnesota competed, well, I mean, they did really well against the Spurs this year. I think they were 3-1 against the Spurs this year. And so the Spurs in the playoffs with that very, very young roster they're performing extremely well. And credit to Anthony Edwards. I think at the end of the first period, or first quarter, my God, the hockey is seeping in. Guys.
Yeah, I know. It's getting there. I believe, okay, here it is. I have it right here. From the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota ended the first quarter on a 19-5 run. Anthony Edwards had scored the last 12 Timberwolves points. He hyperextended his knee like a week ago. He's been unreal. He's looking down Victor Wembanyama one-on-one and stepping back and draining threes on him. Like I'm so impressed with Anthony Edwards this series.
I am too. I agree with you. What impresses me the most outside of just the basketball play on the court, to your point, Josh, is the fact that he wants to be on the court where the stereotype of NBA players is that they don't want to play hurt. Because as I understand it, he actually has a hyperextended knee and is battling runner's knee on his other knee. He has two knees that are problematic, but he's playing more within himself and playing more of a diverse game. So I think what you have from Anthony Edwards is a noble effort and a team-leading effort, and I think he's trying really hard to find a way to lead the Timberwolves back to a victory. And he fought hard last night. It'll be interesting to see how Coach Chris Finch from the Wolves is able to adjust and to see if they can disrupt what now could be very daunting in seeing Wembanyama play the way he did. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to a member of the San Antonio Spurs staff who was mentioned the other night by Doris Burke as saying that he's probably going to be getting some head coaching offers this upcoming off season, and that's Sean Sweeney. Sean played at Cretin-Derham Hall with my son Steve, and Sean went on to play Division I basketball, then finished his career in Division III, got into the NBA bloodstream, was with Jason Kidd for a long, long time, is now the associate head coach of the Spurs, and he is on the fast track to being a head coach. He's the guy who's devising the defense that's bothering Rudy Gobert so much, bothering the Timberwolves. So you have to give Sean Sweeney kudos. I coached Sean with some shooting. I don't want to take any credit for anything, but Sean, he and his family were good friends of ours, and we're really excited for Sean. And nobody works harder than Sean Sweeney in the NBA. The guy's just 18-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week guy, and he gets it done.
That's awesome. Let's move over to number 2 here. We're not seeing a lot of players put their best foot forward this playoffs. However, we have seen a lot of playoff risers up to this point. Ayo Dosunmu comes to mind, Jaden McDaniels. Cade Cunningham has leveled his game up quite a bit. However, to me, the player that has risen the most in this playoffs is the New York Knicks' former Raptor legend OG Anunoby.
That's a good observation, Josh. Kudos to you. You won't see OG with the highest per game scoring average, but he's averaging 22 a game. Mm-hmm. So he's no slouch. He can score, and he has upped his offensive game. He's always been an elite defender, but that defense is even better than it's ever been in his illustrious career, both with the Raptors and now with the Knicks. I always felt it was too bad that the Raptors felt they had to get rid of OG because the potential is being, I think, fulfilled. And I have to give Mike Brown credit. Kudos to Mike Brown for what he's been able to do with the New York Knicks. When you look back to last year with Tom Thibodeau and the way he would run his starters into the ground, Brown has been much more creative with the use of his lineup and also to free up, I think, the offensive capabilities of players not named Jalen Brunson. And OG is one of those. So I think that's a great observation. I would also like to acknowledge what you just said about Cade Cunningham, because Cunningham has been the rock in the rock fights that the Pistons are having with the Cavaliers, and that this guy is one tough competitor. The way he controls the game. And in my conversation with Ben Golliver, we touch on this, but one thing I'd share with you, Josh, is this the observation. What I love about Cunningham is the way he emotes on the court. He is not prone to doing what so many NBA players do that drives old guys like me out of our minds, where they celebrate every little thing that they accomplish during the course of a game like it's the game-winning shot in Game 7 with the over-exuberance, etc. Cunningham's very stoic. He's very steady. He plays extremely hard on every play, and he's developed his offensive game to complement a very tough defensive game as well. I love watching Cade Cunningham play, and I love the way he galvanizes this Detroit lineup that 2 years ago could hardly win a game. It's an amazing turnaround. You have to give credit to J.B. Bickerstaff, their head coach, but you also, I really think, have to give a shout-out to Cade Cunningham and the outstanding NBA player that he's become.
Yeah, he's really been a fun watch, like a really, really fun watch, especially in that first round. He's playing with like a flak jacket under his jersey because of his collapsed lung. Yeah. And then they go down 3-1. You're like, wow, man. And then he starts averaging 38 a game and like 9 assists. You're, oh, never mind. Like Cade Cunningham, I forgot he was in the MVP conversation this year before his lung collapsed.
Deservedly. Before his lung collapsed. We're not talking about tweaking something. You have a collapsed lung, which in some respects is a little more dramatic than it may be, but it's nothing to be fooled with. So Cade Cunningham, he's one of the great players that's emerging as a real star in the league.
Yeah, but going back to my original point of OG, so this year, you shouted out Mike Brown for not like running the starters into the ground and being creative. So this year, OG Anunoby is averaging 4 less minutes than he did in last year's playoff run. He's taking 1 less shot, roughly, and he's shooting about 20% better from the field and 20% better from 3. And his free throw numbers are still the same, but he's averaging 5 more points. Like, he's doing this insanely efficiently like he's taking less threes, so that's good. That's probably why he's shooting 54% from 3-point land. But he just gets it done on the other side of the ball. I love watching OG.
He's a dog on defense, and dog is meant in the most complimentary way. You're absolutely right, Josh.
You even have the opposing coach, who, to be fair, was his former head coach, being like, yeah, well, I remember when I came in and OG was just hanging out with Kawhi Leonard literally all the time, just trying to figure out what he could be. And that was sort of like the comp that people started to give him, because Toronto fans are insane and we just want everything. It was like, oh, well, he's the next Kawhi. He's the next Kawhi. This is the closest anyone's ever been to the next Kawhi, is this insane 3-and-D career that he's had up to this point, and now being able to score at all 3 levels efficiently and consistently.
Well, and I think, too, that goes back to the point about the way that the offense runs now, is that it's not Tom Thibodeau's style of just put the ball in Brunson's hands and start setting screens for him and let Jalen go to work. Everybody else standing around watching. They become much more of a ball movement team, not so dependent on Brunson. And the benefit is the efficiency you just described for not just OG Anunoby, but for Brunson himself, because he doesn't have to dribble the ball to death for entire possessions to try to find a way to score. Cat is more involved. And what I really think is helping the Knicks so much are the other players like Hart and Bridges are more involved on the offensive end too. They're not just spectators. That when you're getting touches on offense, you're going to be better on defense. That always follows. If you're just out there and you're a pylon waiting for a pass from a ball-dominant point guard that you may or may not get, you really have a tendency to become less efficient on offense. So OG is benefiting from that. I'm so glad you shared those statistics because the efficiency that you just described is off the charts. But knowing where you're going to get the shots and knowing that your coach wants you to get those shots are difference makers. So kudos to OG Anunoby. Hopefully his injury isn't too serious. The Knicks are on a roll right now, and the Knicks, I think, if OG is healthy, are the favorites in the East to get to the NBA Finals.
Without a doubt. So going over to number 3. The WNBA season kicked off last night, and we saw the Toronto Tempo play their first ever game. It was a 68-65 loss to the Washington Mystics. My main takeaway from the game is that this year, Marina Mabrey will be an all-star. Way too early prediction, but that's where I'm at.
Mabrey's a really good player. We'll see over the course of the season if your prediction is correct, but does she have all-star, all WNBA, all-star potential? 100%. She's a player. She has attitude, she has swagger, but she has game to match it up. And to have that kind of leadership on an expansion team is invaluable in a coach trying to establish a team's culture. The Tempo were fun to watch. They definitely were. For a first game, and the WNBA is such an anomaly. This afternoon, I mentioned in my opening remarks, Josh, that the CEBL kicks off. One of the aspects of the CEBL is they have a very short training camp window to get your team ready. That involves players coming in staggered times. WNBA isn't unlike that. It's really quite similar. They have more time than a week, but not much more. When you think the rookies. Like Rice last night from UCLA, she was playing the national championship game about a month ago in the NCAA. So it's a real quick turnaround. And to see the quality of play like we saw last night in the first very exciting game in Toronto was really great to see. And to your point, Mabrey's going to be she's such a nice addition, such a great team leader, and she wants to take the tough shot. And she has the ability and the mindset and the confidence and believes when she takes that tough shot that the ball's going to go through the basket. She's
got that Dion Waiters mentality. I'd rather go
Dion Waiters? My gosh, where did you come up with that?
So Dion Waiters had this quote. It said, I'd rather go 0 for 30 than 0 for 9 because that means I didn't lose confidence shooting.
Yeah, that's like Patrick Ewing's comment about the salaries in the NBA, where he said, we have to make a lot of money because we spend a lot of money. So, I mean, with Waiters, I'm just going to keep chucking. I don't really care. The 3 letters that matter most to me are F, G, and A, not just FG.
Yeah.
But it's a valid comparison.
Yeah.
She wants the ball. I would liken it more to Bird and Jordan and guys like that wanted the ball in their hands. Dion Waiters isn't the first guy that would jump to mind for me.
Yeah. One other thing I want to touch on is Kia Nurse last night. She only plays 10 minutes. She only gets 1 shot. I would have just it's your home opener, your inaugural game. I would have liked to see Kia Nurse on the floor, maybe a little more. I know it was a close game, but we're talking about a veteran here, hometown kid. I think that just that gets the crowd a little more into it, that your hometown player is playing something down the stretch. And I think crowd energy really helps affect home teams.
I agree. Well, number one, you're 100% right that crowd energy does affect, oftentimes positively, the home team. That's for sure. But I think what's going to be interesting to watch through this season is Kia Nurse the locker room leader, the hometown figurehead, kind of like is Kia to the Tempo what RJ is to the Raptors, only Kia's role will be reduced. This will be interesting. My own personal observation is Kia is definitely on the downside of her career.
Yep.
Kia has a very diverse career, and I would go so far as to say it's really hard to work on your game when you're doing a lot of other things that she does very well. And so I agree with you, but there's a reason she wasn't on the court, because right now maybe she has an injury that's tweaked, but my guess is it's more Kia's looked to be a role player that has been brought in because of her Canadian connections and her leadership capabilities, which are very, very strong. So your point's well taken, but there's a reason probably, certainly in the coach's eye, why they didn't have her on the court at crunch time last night.
Yeah, hey, no, can't argue with that.
So we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, and by the way, I'm really excited about the music we're playing today. It's going to be an Earth, Wind, and Fire weekend. So that's what we're going to be playing for the rest of our show. And when we come back, we're going to have the first segment of my deep dive conversation with Ben Golliver yesterday. And we, as always, go into the weeds about what's happening in the NBA. It's a great conversation. Looking forward to sharing it with you. And I'm very grateful that you're with us today here on Hoop City with Paul Sir, Josh Fenwick, on your sports leader, Sports 1440.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is Paul Sir. Happy to be joined by my good friend Ben Golliver as we go into the weeds together on all that's going on in the NBA playoffs and much more. Ben, welcome back.
It's great to be back. I love this round. You know, it's not as many different series as the first round, which can kind of feel overwhelming. I think a lot of times we get kind of classic second round series. You know, I'm thinking of like Nuggets Thunder, thinking of Nuggets Timberwolves, you know, from some past years. You just get some good ones. And then you still have enough games, though. So it's not like the conference finals where if you get a dud, the whole night is ruined. You know, at least you get like a backup option every night here if there's a blowout, right?
Well, absolutely. And we've had some compelling series off to a start. I'm going to start with your Lakers. Not that I would use the term compelling so much, but a bit surprising, even though they've lost both games by double digits. I don't think it's exactly what people would have expected. Do you, Ben?
Well, I think the Lakers have a few things they could take away. First of all, LeBron's playing pretty well. I thought he had a really good game one and a good game two. And then they were able to shake off the tough game one loss and really get a nice bounce back from Austin Reeves. And so they can at least say, hey, we're getting, you know, good contributions from our stars. To me, the story has been on the other side with Oklahoma City because, you know, during the regular season, they never felt like they had the championship hangover, right? They start off 24-1. They have all these different injury issues. And you start to think, wow, this is just a machine. These guys are robots. They're not human. They don't have feelings like the rest of us. They could just win. And you get into this playoffs. I thought game one might have been like a D performance by the Thunder, and they still almost won by 20, especially Shea was probably the biggest surprise how much he struggled. And then I thought they were okay. You know, I give them a C or a C plus for game two, but again, they basically win by 20 points. And it feels like they're just kind of waiting until the second half to flip the switch, and they know they're better, and they feel like very confident. I wonder, you know, they're still undefeated. So, you know, this is all nitpicking, right? Picking nits, but in the playoffs, they're undefeated. But I just don't feel like we've seen their A game yet, where we really had to see them pushed and tested. And I wonder if they are going to advance to this Western Conference Finals and they get San Antonio, who they struggled with during the regular season, is that going to be culture shock, right? Where it's like you're going 0-60. You're just kind of coasted along through these first couple of series, and then all of a sudden you're really into the thick of it. Now, you know, Minnesota could still win, and that would be a rematch for Oklahoma City, but I think that would be a physically taxing and difficult matchup for OKC as well. So either way, we know tougher times are coming for OKC. And I guess what I'm looking for here as the series comes back to Los Angeles for games 3 and 4, are they going to have a statement game where they just run the Lakers off the court from start to finish and they tell everybody, hey, we're totally undefeatable and we're not a defending champion to mess with, and we're not taking things lightly? That's what I want to see from the Thunder side.
How much of what you just described in terms of being a bit surprised in the first two games and the way the Thunder have played, how much credit would you give to the Lakers?
Well, I think J.J. Redick is a really sharp coach. If he's not elite, he's very close to it. You see it with his defensive schemes on the opposing star players. It's like Şengün looked atrocious in the first round. And I give a lot of credit to the Lakers' defensive schemes and their ability to implement them on the fly and stick to them. And so what they're doing is they're showing a lot of doubles to Shea, right? They're trying to turn him more into a passer. They're using Marcus Smart, who is a good individual defensive player, on him. And it's not super complicated stuff, but they're sticking to it, and they're kind of making Shea work more so than he had to in the first round series against Phoenix. So I do give the Lakers defense some credit. You know, at the same time, Shea just kind of seems, I don't know if he's in a funk. He doesn't seem quite right. There's shots that he's missing that he would normally make. He had some super careless turnovers in game one, and they had a long wait because they swept in the first round. So maybe there was some rust involved, but it was just, silly stuff that kind of reminds you of the worst of James Harden. That's not what we think of when we think of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in terms of taking care of the basketball, right? And so I want to see him, take a step up. I think he can play a lot better than he's shown in this series. And I think if they're going to beat San Antonio or Minnesota, he's going to have to play a lot better than he has so far against the Lakers. But the Lakers had a huge talent disadvantage, a huge depth disadvantage. They've got a lot of older legs compared to the Thunder. And so when I saw the press conference not too long ago where Luka was saying, hey, the doctors told me 8 weeks. And so he's essentially trying to preemptively pour cold water on any idea of a possible return in this series, I kind of figured, well, the Lakers know the deal. They're not as good as the Thunder across the board. This is probably going to be a sweep or 5 games. They don't want people to get the wrong idea that there's going to be a miracle return that saves everything, and they're just going to take their lumps a little bit. And I think that's largely what we've seen through these first 2 games, even though, at times the games were more competitive than the final score indicated.
Well, they certainly were through 3 quarters. I thought that was, I thought the Lakers kind of hung around unexpectedly. Shea has not looked like himself, both in terms of his play, Ben, but also in terms of what I think you were alluding to in terms of his emotions. Yeah, he looks unsettled right now. A couple of thoughts I had, and I'll relate Shea's play to Wemby's play offensively, because I think people are going, wow, I mean, what's wrong with Wemby? He's not getting 35 and having his way. I think what we're dealing with right now is something called playoff defense, where you're playing somebody game in and game out. You're playing consecutively. Adjustments and nuances can be made. And even as great and versatile as Shea is, he still has tendencies. And what the Lakers are trying to do is take away the comfort zone on some of those tendencies. Certainly the Wolves are trying to muscle, beat up, and push Wemby out of his comfort zone. And to a certain extent, it's working. But I think what people often forget when they start going, oh, this is really weird. What's wrong with them? Nothing's wrong with them. It's what's right with the other team. And this is what everybody has to adjust to when you're in the playoffs. Because one thing about being the defending champion, A, you got a target on your back, and B, everybody wants to do their very best against you, and C, you are, after all, only human.
Well, it's a great point. I still think Shea can play better than he's shown. He can definitely shoot better than he's shown. He can take care of the ball better, but he is getting tested in a big time way. He had that famous line earlier this season about, I don't know what the question's going to be on the test, but I've got all the answers at my disposal, essentially, right? It's like whatever they're going to throw at me, eventually I'm going to figure it out. What's been so impressive about Oklahoma City is that Shea hasn't had to be the answer in the first 2 games, right? Because they're a true team. Same thing goes for San Antonio with Wemby that you're talking about. The balanced scoring is the key to playoff defenses keying on your stars, right? Having the second, third, fourth, fifth scorer, the guy who comes in off the bench who can score. Chet Holmgren, big gold star for him so far in this series, and really against Phoenix as well, because he had a very favorable matchup there. He's been a great source of offense. AJ Mitchell stepping up. He's had some down moments in this playoffs where it gets me a little uncomfortable. Is he trying to do too much? But then again, he has some up moments where you're like, we didn't even know they had guys from Belgium who could play this well. This is like he's trailblazing. He's breaking new ground. So they've had a lot of different guys step up, and of course, you always count on their defense to be there for Oklahoma City. On the Wemby point, I love it. I would only add, it reminds me, how many times did we ever check the box score with Tim Duncan and say, oh, Duncan didn't have 30 points tonight? No one ever did that. If you did that, you're a moron. It's like
as they are now.
Yeah, his impact with Duncan, it's like if he has 6 assists and 12 rebounds and 3 blocks, and his plus minus is probably plus 20, on any given game, he had a good impact. It didn't matter how many points he scored. And with Wemby, it starts with his defense, of course, right? But also, to me, it's all about that scoring balance. And in game 2, every Spur felt like they were grooving. You go right down the list. And didn't Vassell hit a 3-pointer without even coming back to the ground? It was like a midair 3-pointer in the corner. You had De'Aaron Fox, unlocking some stuff after some struggles in game 1. Castle is really coming to his own as a physical presence. Harper looks wise beyond his years, even though he's only 20. I mean, everybody was having success. That is success for Wemby. If he has 20 and all the other starters have between 15 and 20, you're not going to beat the San Antonio Spurs. That's going to be basically impossible. It's all about that team dynamic. And so, that's why when we're analyzing these playoff matchups, a lot of times these days I look towards depth and balance almost before I look to star power, because nobody's going to outsell LeBron when it comes to jerseys. But if he doesn't have 4 other guys he can trust with the ball in their hands and the game on the line, they're not going to go very far. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of the Lakers role players exposed in that series.
It's a G League roster behind LeBron and Austin and Rui and, certainly Marcus. I mean, they've earned that. They've earned a lot of respect. And it's not like you don't respect the other players, but they're just not that good. And when you compare, like you said, the quality of roster, it's just a very different level. I'll go to the check.
Well,
go ahead.
I had one Laker guy tell me, hey, if the Thunder aren't even going to play Aaron Wiggins and he gets a DMP, can we just give him a yellow jersey and he can come over to this side?
Get the pennies out. We're bringing Wiggins over.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like it's an embarrassment of riches for Oklahoma City, and the Lakers are saying, hey, we don't have Luka who's making like $50 million. Of course we don't have enough depth. Give us some help,
That's so true. Let's talk about the Jekyll and Hyde Timberwolves. The Wolves, they gutted out an ugly win in game 1. They made it ugly and, played in some respects pretty darn well. Certainly made San Antonio uncomfortable, but San Antonio, they were close to winning it. Could have won it just as easily as losing it. Then the complete reversal of fortunes in game 2. The Wolves, people are going, the Wolves, what's wrong with them? Well, nothing's wrong with them per se. I mean, it was an awful game. That's how they were all year. They were schizophrenic all year. They would look great one night and then play somebody awful like Washington and just stink it up. And they look like they're 5 steps too slow. And they were just dreadful. They were discombobulated. They went back to that selfish me ball. Like they did everything badly. Do you think the Wolves have something they can tap back into? I mean, DeSumo's been out a few games. Edwards is still not himself. He's still adjusting to, being, playing at 70%. But do you think the Wolves can get back some of that competitiveness with the Minnesota crowd behind them?
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to be awful, but do you think they have enough to win 1 or 2 in Minnesota?
Well, I'm glad you started with their kind of duds, because I say when they lay eggs, it's like dinosaur-sized eggs. They're going for the biggest ones you can. Yeah, exactly. The biggest ones you can imagine. So I looked this up. I think over the last 4 postseasons for Minnesota, they've had 7 losses by more than 20 points. So this is just a part of the deal. And the oldest cliche in the book is like, it doesn't matter if you lose by 1 or lose by 50. And I think Minnesota is like, we are going to try to prove that cliche true until you guys believe it.
That's who they made it up about. Right. It didn't exist before the Timberwolves.
That's right. It's the Timberwolves corollary is what we're going to call that. So, I think that going home is going to be great. They got this split. That's what really matters, right? If you're going to try to pull an upset, you got to get a split, and then you got to protect home court. I came into this series favoring San Antonio, and I actually feel stronger about San Antonio than I did at the start of the series, even though they dropped game 1. The main reason why is Ant-Man has been limited, and I think what San Antonio has figured out is if we dare Julius Randle to go one-on-one and to try to be the hero, and let him take all the clutch time shots because Ant gets tired or Ant is limited by his injury. And we can just dodge guys like Mike Conley hitting a whole bunch of threes like he did in game 1. They're not going to be able to score enough to beat San Antonio. I think that's kind of the game plan. We saw Oklahoma City use a very similar blueprint, right? It's like, all right, well, Randall, we don't trust your ability to take care of the ball, and we don't think you're an efficient enough scorer. So go nuts, and we'll live with it. And you saw that late in game 1, San Antonio made that big comeback in the final 4 minutes, and the ball was in Randall's hands almost the entire time. And he wasn't horrible, but it was, just barely enough to kind of stave them off. And then in game 2, Randall had a whole bunch of turnovers, inefficient scoring, and San Antonio blows them off the map. So I think San Antonio is deeper, more.
Welcome back to Hoop City with Paul Sir. I am pleased to be joined with Pat, be joined by Pat Boylan again from the Indiana Pacers, as we all know him, but now his other gig, which is as the voice of the Indiana Fever, who are about to start their new season today, actually. And Pat, thanks so much for making some time to speak with us.
Of course. Good to be with you and excited to tip off what should be a historic 2026 WNBA season here today for the Fever.
Well, let's talk about that historic, because that's not just a platitude that you're throwing out that doesn't have very real content attached to it. It was such a colorful off season. That's one descriptor I think I could use. But what a season of controversy, of upset, of all kinds of discussions going on a variety of levels. But it ended up with a very progressive contract for the players. They've seen their compensation go up dramatically. And what do you feel like the vibe is, not just within the Fever organization, Pat, but also within the league in general?
Well, as it relates to the contracts, first of all, it's kind of a stunning change, really, because I'm not sure. Maybe you could find another example going way back into the history of all the sports leagues. Usually when you say ever and you talk about sports, you can find a comparison. But you've got a scenario where the players in the 2026 WNBA season that are on minimum contracts are making more money than Supermax players were just last season. So the bottom of the roster is now making more money than the top of the roster less than 365 days ago. And the top of the roster is going from making less than 300,000 US, of course, dollars to as much as 1.4 million. I saw a remarkable nugget that Kelsey Mitchell, who signed for the Supermax with the Fever at $1.4 million this year, is going to make more this season than her previous 8 years in the WNBA combined. So it is an absolutely stunning jump in terms of pay, first and foremost. I think they took a lot of steps in the right direction, including developmental contracts. So this is something that the players have been clamoring for quite some time. For so long, you talked about the WNBA being a league of 144, 12 teams, 12 roster spots. But we're seeing expansion, of course, and into Canada. And we're also seeing roster expansion. So now you're at 15 teams, and teams can keep up to 14 players. I'm not a math wizard. I don't have my calculator in front of me. I'm not sure exactly what that number looks like, but it's more than 144. So that's good, too. And, going into this year, the spotlight is always, as has been since 2024 when the Fever drafted Caitlin Clark, the spotlight is massively on the state of Indiana, the city of Indianapolis, and this franchise. And when you consider the fan base here, the local fan base especially, when you're talking about the Fever, you're almost talking to two different subsets of people. You're talking about the people in Indianapolis and the people in the state of Indiana that are fans of their local team, as anybody would. But the Fever had become such a national brand that there's also fans all over the country and all over the globe. It's really a global brand. So if you just look here locally of the fans that would probably also call themselves Pacers fans, and you think about what the last however many months have looked like, I was just adding this up yesterday. It was kind of depressing. The Pacers and Fever have played a combined 121 games without Tyrese Halliburton or Caitlin Clark taking the floor. Those are our city's two biggest stars. So to have that streak ending here on Saturday is one that fans in this area are thrilled, of course, to be seeing. And then nationally, Caitlin just has such a massive fan base that I think you felt this anticipation build up. And in fact, worry is too strong, but I am a little bit concerned of the fact that this feels like opening day feels like a playoff game. It always has so much attention anyway, the first game in any sports league. But Caitlin Clark has not played since early mid-July, and it's been almost 10 months since she's taken the floor. And if things go really well, it'll be great. If you don't look great on opening day, plenty of good teams don't look great. This is just the first iteration of 44 of these. And, there probably needs to be a realization that no team is at their best here in game number one. But the anticipation level is kind of hard to describe just because it's been so long since we have seen those signature Caitlin Clark moments. And hopefully Saturday from a Fever broadcaster perspective goes well. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be quickly counting the days until game number 2 on May 13th, because I'm sure there will be plenty of rational discourse going on in those 4 days. So excited very much to get the season tipped off and underway. And, I'm biased. I'm a biased guest and I'm a glass half full guest, but I just have this sneaky feeling that this season is going to go well. If you're a believer in karma, it kind of feels like things are going to go maybe swing the other direction in a good way here for the Fever. And they clearly need Caitlin Clark healthy. She'll be out there game number 1 and hopefully for all 44 plus playoffs.
Pat, there have been some naysayers about the WNBA, even as much about the WNBA agreement. And I think it was about 10 days ago, I saw one of the sports pundits in the country talking about the difficulty that Indiana was having in selling out the arena because of the ticket prices, which they claimed were apparently much higher than they were last year. Is that true, or is it a sellout? Certainly the excitement and the vibe is there, but are the people going to fill the stadium as well?
I don't know exactly what the ticket numbers look like, to be honest with you. But we are absolutely expecting a sellout here on Saturday. I did see one post, and I'm not sure if this is what you're referencing or if it was somewhere else. I saw it like a few weeks ago where somebody said, look at all the open seats at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, but when you go on Ticketmaster, the default setting is to show resale tickets as well. So and if you take the resale tab off, then there weren't many seats left. In fact, I checked it yesterday and it wasn't yet a sellout, but the seats that were available were all in the upper corners of the balcony. And if you click resale, anybody can resell their tickets. That doesn't mean that there won't be people in those seats. So I think anticipation level is close to an all-time high. And, there's a marketing side of things. It's frankly way over my head. I'm already dissing my own math abilities here twice in the first 5 minutes. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I don't understand.
Have to get in touch with your elementary school math teacher, Pat.
I'm really good with calculators if I've got one in front of me, and that's about it. But, I don't understand. There's, of course, a business side to all of this. And frankly, for many, many years, not to go down this rabbit hole too far, but for many, many years, the Simons, who are wonderful people and dedicated and passionate owners, took a loss on the Fever for many, many, many years, but because they, A, believed in the product, and B, believed that maybe one day something like this could happen. I don't think anybody imagined this in their wildest dreams. So I will tell you, they asked me, for example, right when I started not when I started, but when Caitlin Clark got here, I should say, if I was okay moving from my broadcast position from the floor to the club level. And I said, first of all, I can't even believe you're asking me this and not just doing it, but I appreciate the thought. And B, absolutely, please do it. If you can sell these 4 seats at a premium, you guys, nobody has been more bought into the WNBA over the last 2 decades than the Simon family. So, I'm sure there is kind of a push and a pull with the levers on exactly how to price things the right way from a business standpoint, but also to be accessible to the fans. But assuming your audience here will be tuning in the not too distant future to our game, you're going to see a full building on Saturday. That's for sure.
I'm talking to Pat Boylan, the voice of the Indiana Fever. They get started this afternoon against Dallas. Now, this is an interesting matchup. You talk about Caitlin's coming back. Of course, everybody is excited. In fact, everybody who has any kind of knowledge about the basketball world in general is familiar with the fact that Caitlin Clark missed a great deal of the season last year. There was all the controversy swirling around at a variety of levels about Caitlin and her impact on the league, some of the controversy around players and how they responded to Caitlin's impact on the league. But now we're getting back to basketball. Let's talk about this matchup between Dallas and Indiana. And of course, 2 Midwestern girls, Caitlin Clark from Iowa and Paige Beckers from Hopkins, Minnesota. They're the stars of their teams, and in many respects, 2 of the big stars in the league itself. What do you think what do you look for this matchup in the game?
First of all, there are just so many aspects of a matchup like this that I love. One of those being, we know that Caitlin Clark is the megastar and the major needle mover. I've had this conversation on your show before. I don't need to rehash it in detail. The WNBA for a long time has seen strong and steady growth year over year. I can give you plenty of examples of how the league has grown from my first year in 2015 to 2023. But Caitlin Clark's emergence has turbocharged, and the league is seeing growth that has been pushed decades forward, in my opinion, solely from the emergence of Caitlin Clark. But for the league's health and continued growth, it cannot be all on her shoulders. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of stars. I mean, Asia Wilson might go down as the best player in the history of the WNBA when she retires. Brianna Stewart is a wonderful talent for the New York Liberty. Sabrina Ionescu has a lot of those talents and capabilities that Caitlin Clark has. But Caitlin Clark is the big needle mover, and as the sport continues to grow, I don't know if this is an apples to apples comparison, but you look at the NBA and you think about the fact that, the NBA has a almost 50-year head start on the WNBA. And when did the NBA really start to take off? In the 80s with Magic and Bird. And of course, here locally, Larry Bird means a whole lot to people here. He's from Indiana, and that really turbocharged the NBA into the 90s and Michael Jordan. We know the story. There needs to be more household name stars in this league. And in my opinion, the most popular player in the WNBA is undoubtedly Caitlin Clark. I think the second most popular player in the WNBA is Paige Beckers. And if there was an Aces fan listening to this, they might take offense to that. I mean none of it. Again, I just said I think Asia Wilson will probably go down as the greatest WNBA player of all time, and she has a tremendous fan base. But we're talking, in my opinion, about another tier that is starting to be reached in the WNBA, which is household names coming out of college with major fan bases. Beckers is not at Clark's level, but I think it's at a level that in the non-Caitlin Clark world, we are seeing for the first time. So that's really exciting to me. I'm hopeful that you're going to have 15 years of Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers going back and forth and each winning multiple championships and multiple MVP awards. And I think we have more coming down the pike. I think Juju Watkins is going to be another great example of that. So as it relates to the game here on Saturday, I almost think it's a perfect opener, because my hope is that it's a small sample and a microcosm of what's going to be a much larger storyline, which is going to continue to lift the WNBA up, of these two mega stars. And by the way, you're talking about the last 4 number 1 overall picks that are going to hit the floor on Saturday, including Aaliyah Boston, who's a great young center, 3-time All-Star in her 3 years, and AZ Fudd, who had a tremendous standout year at UConn as well. So you're going to see some of the top young talent in this league. Clark and Beckers are the headliners, but Boston and Fudd, and for Indiana, Kelsey Mitchell, and for Dallas, Arike Agumbawale. I mean, there's a ton of talent on the floor here tomorrow, and I think it's a great way to get this game and to get this season started. And if you're Indiana and you have contention aspirations, which they absolutely should, it's just one of 44, but I think Dallas is going to be a good team. So I think it's a really good early test for the Fever.
I get goosebumps just listening to you describe it like that, Pat, and it makes me even more excited to watch the game tomorrow, because you've outlined and you've showcased exactly what's going on in the league so very well. You mentioned Bird and Magic. You add, of course, Michael Jordan into the mix, but it transcends just NBA basketball, as we know. You look at the impact of Tiger Woods on golf. It's inexplicable. There's a lot of other great golfers. There's a lot of other great personalities, but once in a while, for a whole bunch of reasons,